أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء وخاتم المرسلين سيدنا ونبينا بالقاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين واللعنة الدائمة الباقية لأعدائهم بالآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه الكريم: إن الدين عند الله الإسلام. صلوات. Sometimes in selecting the topics for different gatherings and events, we look at the historical occasion. But sometimes, especially for Thursday night, because it is not linked to any occasion, sometimes things that you see around forces you to reflect on certain things. In the last week or so, especially when you look at the size of our community, which is a blessing by itself, but you have one day where you have a janazah as well as you have a marriage ceremony. Just last year, I remember it was a Sunday where you move from one setting to another, where there were two events, one janazah and one majlis tarheem, with a marriage between them and at the end. And I was in all four of them. So, maybe the audience would be different for all four, let's say. But for me, I started thinking, this is dunya. You have people doing celebration for, let's say, birth anniversary or their birthday or marriage on one hand, and then you have janazah on the other hand. And this is where you start to think about it, that, this is the reality of dunya. People come and people go. People are happy and people are sad. And this is where we have to think about these issues in that way. One of the questions I get quite a lot, because in the tradition of funeral that we have, one of the things which is recommended, it's not a wajib part of the funeral ceremony, is the issue of Talqeen, where something is recited to the mayyit before the burial and after the burial. And many people, ask this question, and it is a valid question, that, what is the point in talking to somebody who has already passed away? He's dead. And this is where I thought maybe, this would be the opportunity to talk about it. Number one, the word Talqeen. Talqeen means, teaching someone or reminding someone of something. And so the term itself is talking about a mu'min or a mu'mina who has passed away. And now they are going from one phase into second phase of their existence, which is barzakh. And one of the very first situation they will face in the grave is the issue of the munkar and nakir coming, the two angels, to ask them the questions. And so Talqeen becomes like a reminder. And we need that reminder all the time, especially when we are in this state of stress. One of the du'as which is there in Mafati, also dua adila, is actually a dua to maintain our istiqamah, steadfastness in our iman till the last moment. It shouldn't be that shaitan at the last moment, looking at the stress of the person, worrying about the family he is leaving behind, some people at the last moment will start losing faith. And so this is where the time is where, the mayyit is in need of that reminder. And that's where the tradition of Talqeen is there. And as I said, this is not wajib, this is one of the recommendation. The word talqeen, as I said, reminding. It's interesting that the very first two words used, isma' wa ifham. Or it's mu'mina, we say isma'i wa ifhami, which means listen and understand. And they already know, but just they are being reminded about it. And the wording is basically, the theme is there from the A'imma, but the exact wordings that we have now in books is not necessarily from the Imams themselves. The way I have been able to look at it, it goes probably back to Allama Majlisi. But based on the understanding of Talqeen that we have from even the example of the Prophet, and I'll come to that later on. And so right in the beginning where we say, also and so, isma' ifham, listen. And the beginning is, هل أنت على العهد الذي فرقتني عليه. Do you remember the commitment? The covenant that, you had, like us, with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You are, remember, you hopefully you are still with that. And so the basis of Iman is still there. And then, when the two angels will come to you, they will ask you, عن ربك وعن نبيك وعن دينك وعن كتابك وعن قبلتك وعن أئمتك. They will ask you about your Lord. They will ask you about your Nabi. They will ask you about your religion. They will ask you about your book, which is the scripture that you believe in. They will ask you about your Qibla. They will ask you about your Imams. And then, the reminder goes on that when it comes to that, do not be afraid. فَلَا تَخَفْ. Do not be afraid and respond to them that Allah is my Rabb and Muhammad is my Nabi, al-Islamu dini, Islam is my religion, wal-Qur'anu kitabi, wal-Ka'batu qiblati. And then Amirul Mu'mineen and each one of the 12 Imams, you say they are my Imami. And so we have kind of a summary of our faith being repeated at the time of Talqeen. And remember, we should know that and we should understand that before. It will be a very, difficult situation for someone never thinking about these issues, and he's only being reminded when he's dead. These are the things that we have to be ready for it while we are alive. Salawat. But the question still remains that you are saying isma' and ifham. Listen and understand to somebody who is dead. How can he hear or understand? And this is where we have to realize that when we talk about the matters of death and after, especially what is known as the world of barzakh and the world of akhirah, this is an area where we cannot use our aql. Because these are the realities which are beyond the comprehension of our aql. We have to go to the wahi and the teachings of the Prophet and the Imams based on that. Even scholars like Allama Tabatabai, the famous Mufassir of Al-Mizan, he was a philosopher in his own right, who believed in the aqli way of looking at things. But even he used to advise his students. He used to say that when it comes to Tawheed and Adl and Imamat and Nubuwwat and Imamat and the concept of Qiyamat, the basic concept, you can use your aql to, understand it and believe in it. But when it comes to the details of the last one, death and after it, it says aql has no ability to know that. And the only way we can know is through the revelation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and through the sayings of the Imam. And it's not only Allama Tabatabai. If you go back to the 4th century, even Sheikh Mufid makes that point, that our aql doesn't have the capability of telling us what will happen later on. The aql can prove to us that if God is there and if He is just and there is a system, the purpose of life is there has to be reward and punishment, and so there has to be a second life. That's it. But what will happen? What will happen after death? What will happen in the barzakh? What will happen on the day of Qiyamah? Aql doesn't have the capacity to tell us that. And this is where we have to come to the what we call dalil naqli from the Quran and the hadith of the Ma'sumin alayhi salatu wa salam. Salawat min al-Bikram. Combining aql and naql here. The question of when people ask, how can the mayyit hear? The question that we have to answer in response to that is it the ears that hear? When a person is alive, his ear and the mechanism of, the hearing power and ability, is everything intact. There is nothing, disability or abnormality. When he was alive, he was hearing perfectly. But then a person dies. As far as his physical ear is concerned, and the mechanism in there is still there, but he can't hear. And this is where the issue comes up, that hearing is not, this is just a tool. The actual hearing is done by the soul. If the soul is not there, the best of the ear, maybe it can be transplanted into somebody who is alive and he can use it. But, if the soul is not in that body, that equipment is useless for him. And that's where we come to realize that, it is not necessarily these are only the tools that Allah has given to us. The main source of everything is basically the soul. And if you understand that, then it becomes easier to understand this concept of talqeen. Talqeen, when you are saying isma, ifham, although we are addressing the body there, but actually when I say isma and ifham, I'm not saying to the body. The soul is still there. Until the burial, the soul is close by. And the address is not to the body, but to the ruh. Isma' ifham. Listen and understand. And this is where, we see that although the soul is separated from the body, but is not totally disconnected. It is still there until after this process of, the Shawwal in qabr is done, then, it goes into this state of barzakh, where the soul would be either in Wadi Salam or Wadi Bar'ud. And this is where we have to realize that what is being addressed is not the body, rather the soul and the ruh of the person. Salawat. Another question that people ask that, why in Arabic? He is Gujarati speaking, or he is Urdu speaking, or he knows Punjabi or Farsi, and you are saying to him in Arabic, Isma' ifham. But he doesn't know the language. This is the whole issue. If you're addressing the body, then you will have to, means when you are addressing the soul which is confined by that body, then there is only one or two languages that it can understand. Because, a person is actually, the soul is now confined by the environment. The soul itself has the ability to understand and learn any language. We know the situation of people who, let's say, Caucasian couple adopts a newborn Chinese baby. And the child grows up speaking English, doesn't know a single word of Chinese. So it means that, the soul, the human being has that capacity of learning whatever language. So it is the environment which puts this restriction, whether you are speaking Arabic or Farsi or Urdu, whatever. So you have a child born from another ethnicity, other area, you put the child in another situation, you will see they will speak another language. So the potential is there. But when this body is separated from when the soul is separated from the body, that limitation is gone. And what is the language of the Akhirah? It is not English or French, or Farsi or Urdu, or Gujarati or Kutchi. No, it is Arabic. And so, yes, we say in Arabic, Isma' ifham, it is being addressed to the soul, which is now outside its confinement of this body. And therefore, it will have the ability, to understand Arabic. So those of you who are still struggling to learn Arabic, don't worry. The time will come, all of you you understand Arabic. Salawat, brother. This is also an issue in a way related to the Shuhada. One of the problems that the Wahhabis have with the ziyarat of qubur is they say you people are talking to those who are dead. Whether it is the Rasul or Shuhada, for Shuhada we would still say there is an ayat of Quran where Allah says they are still alive in a way. And this is where, I had a talk in the early Sha'ban at the Jafri Center on the occasion of, anniversary of demolition of Jannatul Baqi. And I was presenting this year a book which is recently being published in Saudi Arabia. It's more about a history of the historical monuments of Medina. But it's interesting to see that even they, when they write history, they are forced to write things which goes against their own Wahhabi, thinking. And there are examples where they say that so and so during the early days went to Uhud and to the grave of Hazrat Hamza. And after this one lady's example, they actually multiple examples they have there in history. And this is a book printed in Saudi Arabia itself, where this lady says, I especially went from Medina to Uhud for the ziyarat, and after reciting namaz by the grave of Hazrat Hamza, I pointed towards the grave and I said salam to him. And all of a sudden I saw the response of the salam coming from the earth. For a moment she was afraid. But she looked around, there was nobody there. And she says, I am so much sure that I heard the response from the grave the way I am sure that Allah is my creator. That was the conviction that she had. One of the sons, Amir al-Mu'mineen, of course, he had been blessed with more than 30 children. One of his son or grandsons, there is a narration in that book, that he went there with a small child and he did salam to the grave of Hazrat Hamza and got the response. So he looked around and then he asked the child, did you answer the salam that I did to the grave? He said, no, I didn't do that. And he repeats it. And again he gets the response. This is where we have to realize that, when we talk about this issue of talqeen, addressing those who are dead, it's actually not referring to the body, it's referring to the soul. If we can comprehend that much, then it's easier to understand even this concept of ziyarat of qubur. The way I use the example, and maybe I, mentioned it here even before, that, all of us, we have our mobile phones here. If somebody is calling you on your phone, my mobile phone will not ring. Although the airway is all free, there is no restriction, it's not connected to any wire. But the point is that your mobile phone is connected to a number. And if somebody calls your number, it's only your phone where you will have the connection. So when you go to Karbala, for example, or you go to Medina and you say salam to the Prophet or other Shuhada and the Imams, it is a matter of connection. If you really are on that level of Iman, the answer comes. If you look at the ziyarah of Imam Hussein, probably from the 15th of Rajab, where we say to the Imam that, oh Imam, I'm sure that you'll hear my salam and you'll respond to my salam, although I do not hear it. I do not hear it because of my own limitations. If I bring myself to a level, I would be able to, hear the salam. Salawat. One of the prominent alim, and this is a narration coming from somebody I know personally, very reliable, and he heard from that person directly. He says, I'd gone for ziyarat to Karbala, and he says, I saw a dream that I'm going on to the haram of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and I saw there was young men who came in, and as soon as he said salam, he got the answer. Now this alim was surprised, what does this dream mean? And then he got up, went to the haram, and subhanallah, he saw that same young man that he saw in the dream. So he started following him. And he saw that when he goes there, he did the salam and he gets the answer. So he then sat down with him. He says, what is it that you have done? That you have attained that level that Imam gives you the salam. Alayka salam ahsant. This is how he would get the response. And he said, I really am not a very great man or anything. Yes, there is one thing I used to do, and that's when this process started. That whenever I do the salam, I get the response. He says, once a week I would come to Karbala. So he was living somewhere, away from, not necessarily far away city, but in a village or somewhere around Karbala. He said, once a week I would come for the ziyarah of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And I have an old father who cannot walk. And he told me that, you go every week. I also want to go. Now those days, you don't have traveling facilities, no wheelchair, nothing. He says, okay, this week I'll take you. And so he basically put his father on his back. Carried him, from his own place all the way to the haram of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. He says, from that day when I went for ziyarat, and as usually I did the salam, I got the response, Alayka salam ahsant. Salawat. And this is where, the issue is that, yes, you will be able to hear the response from the salam of the Aimma, Awliya, and the Shuhada. But it all depends whether we have that connection or not. Sometimes you might even have your, cell phone. These days the technology has advanced. But there was a time, sometimes you have all these equipments. You might have the battery there, but it's rusted. So the battery is there, but there is no connection there. Sometimes we need to actually, remove that rust from our heart. And only then that connection will come. And then you will be able to actually hear the response coming from the grave of the awliya. Salawat. Talking about addressing the people who are dead, now that was a positive side, where you hear the response. On the other side, after the Battle of Badr, when the mushrikeens were defeated and their bodies were put in one place, the Prophet actually goes there. And addressing the leaders of mushrikeen, he says, Ya Aba Jahl bin Hisham, Ya Utba bin Rabi'a, Ya Shayba bin Rabi'a, Ya Fala bin Fala, هل وجدتم ما وعد ربكم حقا. Did you find what your Lord had promised you to be true? Or did you see what I was saying to be the truth? And this is where, he says, and he says to them, you were bad neighbors to me. You threw me out of my home and my city, and see what has happened to you. Then you gathered and conspired to kill me. And now you will see, فَقَدْ وَجَدْتُ مَا وَعَدَنِ رَبِّي حَقًّا. I have found that what my Lord had promised me to be the truth. What about you? At that time, and this is narration even in Sayyid Bukhari, Sayyid Muslim, Ibn Kathir and others also, Umar said to Ya Rasulullah, ma khitabuka? Why are you talking to these dead people? They don't hear. And this is where, the Prophet says, Mahya ibn al-Khattab, you be quiet. فَوَاللَّهِ مَا أَنْتَ بِأَسْمَعَ مِنْهُمْ. By Allah, you don't have the ability to hear more than them. You still might have, barriers, but they don't have any barriers now. And this is where we have to realize that after death, it is this soul which is there, being addressed when we say in Talqeen, Isma' wa ifham, this is not the body. And so then this concept of, reciting Talqeen for the Mayyit becomes more understandable and, plausible for us to realize that yes, this can happen in that way. One example which is from our own books is actually the wafat of Fatima bint Asad, the mother of Amir al-Mu'mineen. And this is where it's a very beautiful narration. Let me present to you that when she passed away, أقبل علي باكيا. Ali came to the Prophet crying. So crying on a death is not a bidat. فقال النبي ما يبكيك. What made you cry, Ali? May Allah not ever make you cry. And he says, توفيت والدتي يا رسول الله. That, oh, the Messenger of Allah, my mother has died. And that's where the Prophet says, بل ووالدتي يا علي. Not only your mother has died, she was my mother also. Because of the sacrifice of Fatima bint Asad in, raising Rasulullah and taking care of him, where he says, لقد كانت تجوع أولادها وتشبعني. Her children, she will leave them hungry when there was not enough, but she will make sure that I have enough to eat. And then, she especially talks about one dead tree which was in the yard of the house of Abu Talib, which has very delicious khurma. And he says that she used to actually keep that, especially for me. When the children are gone, her own children are gone or sleeping, then she will take out and give that to me. And this is where Rasulullah is remembering her as walidati. She was my mother. And so, he says to Ali that, go and make the preparation for the janazah. ثم نحذ عليه السلام فأخذ في جهازها وكفنها بقميصها. بقميصه, this is where it's interesting. He gives his own shirt to Ali. He says, give to the ladies who are doing the ghusl and kafan that they put this, use that as the kafan. And while he was going in the janazah, he was kind of carefully, when he was taking his steps right and left, very carefully. And he was barefooted at the time. And then when it came to the janazah, he repeated the namaz janazah multiple times, total 70 times, which makes it about 14 times namaz. ثم لاحدها في قبرها بيده الكريمة بعد أن نام في قبرها. And when it came the time to bury her, first the Prophet goes in the grave, lies down in the grave, then he came out and then he helped Ali in putting her down in the grave. وَلَقَّنَحَ الشَّهَادَةَ, and then he recited the Talqeen. فلما أهيل عليها التراب وأراد الناس الانصراف. It says when the earth was closed with the earth, the grave was closed, and people started leaving. This is where the Prophet stood there by the grave, and he started talking to her, and he says, "Ibniki, ibniki, ibnik." Addressing Fatima bint Asad, he says, "Your son, your son, your son. La Ja'far wa la Aqil." Not Ja'far or Aqil. Ibnika, ibnika Ali bin Abi Talib. Your son, Ali bin Abi Talib. Salawat. And so the companions were surprised. He has never done this before. So they asked him. They told him, فَعَلْتَ فِعْلًا مَا رَعَيْنَا مِثْلُهُ قَدْ. You did something in a funeral that we had not seen you doing this before. The way you walked, barefooted, carefully, putting your feet on the ground, giving your shirt for kafan of Bi Fatima bint Asad, and you addressing the grave, ibniki, ibniki, la Ja'far wa la Aqil. And so this is where the Prophet now, explains to them. He says, as far as, my walking is concerned, where I was being very careful because of the crowd and the numbers of malaika who had come in the janazah. You don't see them, but I can see them. And because of that, I was being careful when I was walking in the janazah. As far as my takbir is concerned, because there were multiple groups of malaika who came one after another. And so I basically joined with them in doing that again and again. And as far as وَأَمَّا نَوْمِي فِي لَحْدِهَا, why did I go and lie down in the grave before putting her down in the grave? Because whenever I talked about this issue of death, what will happen after that, especially fishar qabr as we call it, the squeezing of the grave. Fatima bint Asad, when she heard that from Rasulullah first time, she became very distressed. That is this what is going to happen? And this is where Rasulullah remembers that. And he says, I lied down in the grave first, so that the grave will not have this fishar for her. And that is where وَعَمَّا تَكْفِينِي لَهَا بِقَمِيسِي. Why did I use my qamis, my shirt for her kafan? Because when I was talking about the day of Qiyamah and the day of Hashr and the gathering of the people, I mentioned that people will be raised naked with no covering. And this is where Fatima bint Asad again felt very distressed about that scene for herself. And this is where, the Prophet said, by putting my qamis on her as a kafan, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will cover her unlike others on the day of Qiyamah. Salawat. But the last part is the theme that I have for this talk today, which is about Talqeen. وَعَمَّا قَوْلِ لَهَا. What I said to her by standing at the grave, ibniki, ibniki la Ja'far wa la Aqil. Why did I say, your son, not Aqil, not Ja'far, but Ali bin Abi Talib? فَإِنَّهَا لَمَّا نَزَلَ عَلَيْهَا الْمَلَكَانِ وَسَأَلَاهَا عَنْ رَبِّهَا. When the two angels, Munkir and Nakir, came in the grave and they asked her, who is your Lord? She responded very easily. She said, Allahu Rabbi. Same questions we have in Talqeen. وَقَالَ مَنْ نَبِيِّكَ. مَنْ نَبِيِّكَ, who is your Nabi? She said, Muhammad Nabiyyi. فَقَالَ وَمَنْ وَلِيِّكَ وَإِمَامِكَ. And who is your wali and imam? In a way, historically, Imamat has not yet started that way. فَاسْتَحْيَتْ أَن تَقُولْ وَلَدِي. She kind of felt, embarrassed to say, my son. And that's where I told her, قُولِي إِبْنِكَ عَلِي بِنْ أَبِي طَالِبٍ لَا جَعْفَرْ لَا عَقِيلٍ. Make it clear you are talking about your son Ali and not Aqil or Ja'far. فَأَقَرَّ بِذَلِكَ عَيْنَهَا. This is where she beheaded now. At that time, she had this, peace of mind and the lightening in her eye after giving that response. Salawat upon the Akbar. تلقین کے بارے میں چونکہ ہم نے کہا تھا، جو کبھی کبھی جن واقعات کو ہم لوگ دیکھتے ہیں، انسان اس سے متاثر ہوئے بغیر نہیں رہتا ہے کہ ایک طرف شادی ہو رہی ہے، ایک طرف جنازہ ہے، اور یہی دنیا کی حقیقت ہے. کوئی آتا ہے تو کوئی جاتا ہے، کوئی اپنی زندگی بناتا ہے اور کوئی جو ہے کسی کا گھر ویران ہو جاتا ہے. اور یہ وہ حقیقت ہے جس کے لیے ہر انسان کو تیار رہنا چاہیے. اور تلقین در حقیقت وہ ریمائنڈر ہے ہر مومن و مومنہ کے لیے کہ جب اس مرحلے سے گزرتے ہیں، سب سے پہلی منزل ہوگی سوال جواب کی، اور اسی پر منحصر ہے کہ برزخ میں ہماری کیفیت کیا رہے گی. اور اسی لیے یہ مومن و مومنہ کو یاد دلایا جاتا ہے کہ بھئی یہ تمہارا عقیدہ تھا، یہ تمہارے بنیادی اصول ہیں جس پر چلنا ہے، اور جو سوالات ہوں گے تو یہی آپ کو جواب دینا ہوگا. اور یہ مسئلہ اپنی جگہ پہ مسلمات میں سے ہے. مومنین کے لیے تو یہی ہے کہ بھئی دفن سے پہلے بھی آپ تلقین پڑھیں، دفن کے بعد بھی جب مومنین چلے جاتے ہیں تقریباً 40 قدم، وہ 40 سے مراد وہ ایگزیکٹلی 40 قدم نہیں ہے، 40 کبھی کبھی یوز کیا جاتا ہے عربک لینگویج میں فور quite a few steps. وہ ایگزیکٹ 40 نمبرز کی بات نہیں ہے کہ وہ کاؤنٹ کر کے رکھا جائے کہ قبر سے 40 قدم ہی جائیں، نہیں، تھوڑا دور ہٹ جائیں، اس کے بعد پھر وہ تلقین پڑھی جاتی ہے. اور یہ مومنین یہ ایک دوسرے کے لیے یقیناً کرتے ہیں، اور یہ حق ہوتا ہے ہر مومن و مومنہ کا. خود رسول اسلام نے جناب فاطمہ بنت اسد کے لیے یہ کیا ہے، اور خود جو عنوان تھا جنازوں میں شرکت کرنے کا رسول اسلام کا، وہ بہت سے واقعات ہیں. البتہ جس طرح سے جناب فاطمہ بنت اسد کے لیے کیا تھا یہ بالکل یونیک تھا، منفرد بات تھی، اس لیے لوگوں نے سوالات بھی کیے ہیں کہ یہ کیوں ہوا ہے. لیکن اس سے کم ہم لوگوں کو اتنا اطمینان حاصل ہو جاتا ہے کہ جو ہم لوگ کرتے ہیں یہ اللاجیکل بات نہیں ہے. یہ ریشنل بیسس پہ بھی اگر سوچا جائے کہ انسان کا تعلق اس کی حقیقت روح ہے، جسم نہیں ہے. جسم صرف ایک ویکل ہے، اور جب برزخ میں جاتا ہے تو وہ روح نہیں مرتی ہے. موت جو ہے یہ موت جسم کی ہوتی ہے، روح کی نہیں ہوتی ہے. جسم ختم ہو جائے گا، لیکن روح جو ہے اپنے اس حیات کے سفر کو جاری رکھے گا. اب وہ اس دنیا سے وہ برزخ میں ہے، اور وہاں بھی روایات کے لحاظ سے ایک بدن مثالی ملے گا روح کو، خصوصاً مومنین کے لیے، جو روح اس میں در حقیقت سفر کرے گی قیامت کے دن تک. تو یہ سلسلہ جو ہے وہ چلنے والا ہے، اور جو خطاب جو ہوتا ہے وہ بیسیکلی ارواح مومنین سے ہے، ان کے جسم سے نہیں ہے. لیکن بہرحال ہر انسان کا، خصوصاً ان کے گھر والوں کے بارے میں یہ تمنا ہوتی ہے کہ وہ آخری یہ رسومات میں شرکت کر سکیں. ہمارے یہاں اردو میں تو وہ کہاوت بھی ہے نا کہ وہ مٹی بھی نہیں ڈال سکے، جبکہ ہمارے یہاں کائنڈ آف مکروہ ہے کہ کوئی اپنے خونی رشتہ دار کی قبر میں مٹی ڈالنا حرام نہیں ہے. لیکن اردو میں کہاوت ہی کچھ اور ہے، اس معنوں میں کہ انسان کی خواہش ہوتی ہے کہ آخری وقت جو ہے وہ ہم موجود رہیں. اور خصوصاً یہ جو باتیں ہوتی ہیں، ہر انسان چاہتا ہے کہ ان کے تمام غسل و کفن کا سلسلہ، تدفین کا سلسلہ، نماز جنازہ کا سلسلہ، تلقین کا سلسلہ، یہ سب جو ہے ٹھیک ٹھاک ہو. لیکن ہم جب اپنے مرحومین کے لیے سب کرتے ہیں تب ہمیں ہمیشہ اس منظر کو یاد رکھنا چاہیے کہ ایک جوان بیٹا تھا. یہ نہیں ہے کہ وہ غریب تھے، لیکن حالات سے مجبور تھے. یہ نہیں ہے کہ جنگل میں وہ صرف تھے اور باپ تنہا تھے اور ان کا انتقال ہوا ہے اور صلاحیت نہیں تھی. نہیں، ہزاروں کی تعداد میں مسلمان تھے جو اپنے کو مسلمان کہتے تھے، لیکن وہ بیٹا باپ کے بالین پہ نہیں پہنچ سکا. جو حضرات زیارت پہ جاتے ہیں وہ دیکھتے ہیں کہ امام حسین علیہ السلام کا روضہ، اور اسپیشلی روضہ میں وہ مقام جسے مقتل کہا جاتا ہے، جہاں امام کو قتل کیا گیا ہے، اس میں اور جو خیام امام تھے زیادہ فاصلہ نہیں ہے، واکنگ ڈسٹنس ہے. لیکن امام زین العابدین علیہ السلام اس حالت میں وہاں نہیں پہنچ سکے. ان کی پھوپھی طلہ زینبیہ سے اس منظر کو دیکھ رہی تھی، اور اسی لیے جب واپس آتی ہیں بیٹے کو جگاتی ہیں اور کہتی ہیں کہ بیٹا آنکھ کھولو اور دیکھو کہ یہ کیا آواز آ رہی ہے. اس وقت امام زین العابدین کی جو کیفیت تھی وہ کوئی اس کو احساس نہیں کر سکتا ہے، اس لیے کہ امام جب وہاں روانہ ہوئے ہیں اور جب یہ قافلہ جو ہے اسیروں کا شہداء کے لاشوں کے درمیان سے جب گزارا گیا ہے، عام طور سے خواتین جو ہیں زیادہ جذباتی ہوتی ہیں، اس لیے کہا جاتا ہے کہ قبرستان میں جنازے کے وقت عورتوں کے لیے جانا مکروہ ہے. وہ اس لیے کہ وہ اپنے جذبات پر قابو نہیں رکھ سکتی ہیں. لیکن کربلا میں ہم نے کچھ اور دیکھا ہے. کربلا میں ہم نے دیکھا کہ جب یہ قافلہ شہداء کے لاش کے قریب سے گزرا ہے، جہاں بیویوں نے اپنے وارثوں کے لاشوں پر گرا دیا ہے، جناب زینب حسین کے لاشے پہ رو رہی تھی، لیکن روتے روتے ایک مرتبہ ان کی نظر جاتی ہے عابد بیمار کے چہرے پر، اور زینب خاتون ہوتے ہوئے خاموش ہو جاتی ہیں، صبر کر لیتی ہے، اپنے آہ و بکا کو روک دیتی ہے، کہتی ہیں بیٹا تیری یہ کیا کیفیت ہو رہی ہے، یہ نہ ہو کہ یہ زمین حجت خدا سے خالی ہو جائے. اس وقت امام زین العابدین نے یہ جملہ کہا تھا، پھوپھی جان میری یہ کیفیت کیوں نہ ہو، ہم زندہ ہیں اور جوان ہیں، لیکن بابا کا لاشا بے گور و کفن کربلا میں چھوڑ کے جا رہے ہیں. اس وقت زینب نے تسلی کے لیے کہا تھا بیٹا اتنا غم نہ کرو، ہم نے میرے بابا سے سنا ہے کہ یہاں مزار بنے گا، لوگ بڑی تعداد میں تیرے بابا کی زیارت کے لیے آئیں گے. لعنت اللہ علی القوم الظالمین سیعلم الذین ظلموا ای منقلب ینقلبون. خداوند اس عباد قبول فرما، ہمارے گناہوں کو بخش دے، ہماری توفیقات میں اضافہ فرما. خداوند شیعان علی جہاں ہیں ان کو اپنے حفظ امان میں رکھ، مسلمانوں میں امن اور اخوت و برادری کا جذبہ پیدا کر. دشمنان اسلام خصوصاً جو تکفیری افواج ہیں ان کی تمام صلاحیتوں کو نیست و نابود فرما. امام کے ظہور میں تعجل فرما. ربنا تقبل منا انک انت السمیع العلیم.